What is it you need from me as your leader for you to be able to be your best self in this role? What would you get if you were able to have that conversation with your direct reports?
Being able to get out of your comfort zone is so important when you're trying to lean into somebody else's situation and understand their perspective, understand where they're coming from, and understanding their pain point.
We're picking up here right where we left off in the last episode.
One of the things I see in the work that I do is that having these kinds of conversations, especially leaders with their direct reports, who themselves are leaders, there is something really difficult for many of them to be able to ask questions to demonstrate that they don't have all the answers, which is also a demonstration of recognizing that they don't need to have all the answers. So the difficult conversations about saying, I don't even know what I don't know, and I want to know it, versus, look, talk to the hand, I'm paying you well, I just need you to do your work, don't expect any special treatment from me, it's on you. And you think about the opportunities that are lost by being able to connect, leaning in at the next level with the individuals who you're counting on to perform.
Vulnerability. I have to be vulnerable in order to lean in. And vulnerability terrifies people.
So let's talk some more about that. Vulnerability. You think about, so what does that represent in terms of something to be afraid of?
Exposure. I'm going to expose who I really am. Woo-hoo! That's scary stuff for a lot of people. I've never really had a problem. But it's also gotten me into a handful of labels that I don't want to carry.
Well, yes. Okay.
But I also think, it's interesting because a question that I'm often asked is, how do I build relationships so quickly? Guess what? Being vulnerable, leaning in. That's how I build my relationships. And it's very easy for me to do. It hasn't always been very easy for me to do. Leaning in, to a degree, has been easy. The vulnerability piece, that has come with years of practice and years of thought work. But it's scary for people to expose themselves and to be like, this is who I am, take it or leave it. But you also can't use that excuse of, that's who I am, and I harm people. That's who I am, I don't care. You still have to care about the impact you're having on others.
It sounds like a good idea. It's not well demonstrated on many occasions.
That is true.
And I think being able to be vulnerable, I've had some experience with that as well. You go through something difficult going on in your life, be it your health or relationship or family matter, whatever it might be, and there are some things that can interfere with that complete, total focus. And being able to introduce the fact that you know that this is going on, and I'm not asking for special favor, I am asking for you to be aware that I'm doing my level best in the spirit of teamwork, leadership, all of that, responsibility, and that at the moment I'm a little half bubble off of that strong, confident me that you're used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's scary because you're supposed to be the rock. You're supposed to be strong and in charge. You're supposed to be the one that is going to carry the torch even if it's raining cats and dogs. You're the one. I have so many leaders that have struggled with the notion that they need to take care of their folks when they're leading through change. And that's my thing. But the notion that they shouldn't have to help the organization make the shift from the old to the new. We're paying them well. We don't have time for that kind of soft, fluffy crap. I shouldn't have to tell them the change is not that big a deal. All of these different excuses for not having the tough conversations that say, I need to understand where I'm a little tangent. you as a sponsor for a change and your leadership stakeholder team, how confident are you that all of you are truly on the same page with the value of the change you are getting ready to take the organization through? How confident are you that the messaging is clear and compelling and unified, even if the change is going to be hard? How confident are you? And what would that confidence give you if you could know that the message is getting out there, your folks are aligned, and they're, you know how many meetings you would be able to cut out if you had that one conversation in the beginning of any project that's going to involve changing what people do or how they do it? Can you imagine how many meetings would be saved? Okay, so off my rant. But back to that whole exposure, the question of exposure and what it does to one's confidence as a leader.
I think confidence, and then the wondering of what will people think? What are people going to remember? Vulnerability for a lot of leaders is weakness.
And where did that come from?
It's man's world. But really, think about it. The bulk of our leaders, our senior leaders, our CEOs across the globe are men. Men are not typically vulnerable. Not to say they can't be, and not to say that some break that mold. But you're stoic, you're strong, you're leading.
And these aren't necessarily, I want to just underscore this, because these aren't just impressions and assumptions. These are scientific, research-based declarations that you're making.
Yeah, yeah. And as women progress in the workforce, many of them bring a different look and feel to leadership. I've worked for some amazing male leaders. I've had a few incredible male leaders, and they have been vulnerable. They have been great. They met me where I was at. They helped me with my career. The bulk of them did not. The bulk of them were suck it up and keep going. And that's the end of the conversation. It didn't matter what was a challenge. It didn't matter what was hard. It didn't matter if I didn't understand something. You figure it out and you keep going along. To some degree, that has served me well. But as a leader, that does not serve me well. As a person who is going to dig in and figure shit out, I got that. I'll figure something out all day long. Mm-hmm. But as a leader, that is never the approach I want to take. And so I'm very grateful for the leaders I had who were like that, because I know that is not how I want to be. That is not how I want to show up for my team. That is not how I want to show up for other people, whether it's a direct leadership employee relationship or it's just being a leader amongst my people, my friends. I don't want to show up like that.
So even bad examples are good examples.
Absolutely. That's where I learned my best lessons, is from some of the worst leaders I've ever had.
I have to agree.
And I also think vulnerability is really getting out of your comfort zone and being able to meet someone where they're at, to lean in where someone is at, is uncomfortable sometimes. I'm fortunate, using the autism example, I have a lot of people in my life, either with children who are on the autism spectrum or family. So I'm not going to say I'm well studied, but I know enough about it to recognize some of it and to be able to have a conversation with somebody. And that's not uncomfortable for me. But for some people, it's incredibly uncomfortable because they think that gets in the way of them performing their job. Instead of looking at it from, how can I make your job easier? How can I make your job more accessible to you? They just see it as, this person's got to go.
How is it that we can bring out the best in you? What does it take?
Yeah. And you think about anyone who's just doesn't maybe fit the typical mold. You think about somebody who thinks differently, who processes differently, who asks questions a little bit differently. Those people tend to stick out. Or they're just quiet all the time. They stick out because they don't fit the quote-unquote norm. Those are the people that you want to lean into and say, how can I make this better for you? How can I make this more comfortable for you? How can I make it easier for you? How can I make you feel like you're going to be successful in this job or in this role? And maybe you're not in the right role, and we'll find you something else. But you've got to be able to lean in and meet people where they're at. And there's just so many assumptions that come into, who'd you say, what was your Billy and Pat? Pat, but Billy's lazy. Billy's useless. Billy can't do his job. But I bet if someone would have had a conversation with Billy to say, hey, Billy, what's going on? I see that you haven't met this deadline 3 times now. How can we do this differently?
And we've shared stories about that. Your friend in the manufacturing facility who was late all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And a simple conversation, leaning in, that leader leaned in, say, look, let's talk about this.
Yeah. I had a situation many years ago, and it wasn't anyone who reported to me, but I was getting a lot of comments about this particular person. I'll call him Joe. And Joe was typically pretty sarcastic. He was kind of a funny guy, but his sarcasm was turning to be biting. It was hurting people. And no one was willing to have a conversation with him, so they all came to me to complain about Joe. And I went to Joe's leader and said, hey, you need to have a conversation with Joe. This is what's going on. This is feedback I'm getting from your team, my team, and someone else's team. So something's going on with Joe. I don't want to talk to him. He's our employee. What do you mean you don't want to talk to him? I can't handle him. Fine, I'll go talk to Joe. So I go and I have a conversation with Joe. And I just said, hey, I'm sharing this because I got this feedback and I want to share it with you and I want to understand what's going on. So I told him about some of the feedback that I got, and he just hung his head. He was so just ashamed that he was hurting people. It hurt his heart that he was hurting people. And he said, I'm really sorry. I'm going through a divorce right now, and I'm pretty bitter about it. No one knew he was going through a divorce. No one knew that anything was going on in his life that was a challenge. He was just this happy-go-lucky guy. Life of the party.
Trying to maintain.
Yeah. But that sarcasm, that funniness just turned bitter to people, and it was starting to harm people. So we had a lovely conversation. What do you need from us to help support you? And we have resources for you and all of that. And about a week later, he came back to me and said, hey, Shelley, I just wanted to know if you've gotten any more feedback. And I apologize for not following up with him, because I should have, because almost every person who came to complain about me said, I don't know if you talked to him or not, but it's better. So I shared with him that, yes, you whatever you were doing has been corrected. Keep doing that. But his own leader wasn't willing to lean into that. And so I did, which is kind of annoying to me. But I'm always happy to do that because I'm skilled enough to lean into those kinds of awkward, difficult conversations. And I'm pretty sure I even started this might be a little awkward for us.
Like, I have some feedback for you.
Yeah, exactly. But being able to get out of your comfort zone is so important when you're trying to lean into somebody else's situation and understand their perspectives, understand where they're coming from, and understanding their pain points.
This isn't something that is really a part of basic management training. And I acknowledge that simply because if people would be needing guidance on, practice on, leaders who are doing that, to give them an example of how to be vulnerable, how to lean in without, you're not relegating your responsibility as a leader by opening up and saying, I don't understand what's going on here. I would really like to.
Mm-hmm.
And expose that you care. Some of it is just maybe common sense. Some of it is good manners. But when it comes to vulnerability and exposure from a place of power, there's something that gets lost. Mm-hmm. And how do we help develop that? Number one, the awareness of the importance of and the way to demonstrate this leaning in. And then how do we help perpetuate it? How do we help it grow in an organization? How do we help make that another key element of leadership behavior that gets rewarded? Because you get what you reward.
Well, Yeah, therein lies the problem. It's very cultural driven, and obviously businesses are in business to make money and sell their product or their services.
Uh-huh.
And I've worked for leaders that have left quote unquote bodies in their wake.
Yes.
But they get amazing results. So they are continuously rewarded for those results. They're never measured on the 52 people that they've left in their wake that are drowning or just miserable. They're not measured on that in a lot of organizations. I have seen some shifting in how organizations are measuring performance now. It's much more behavior based. It's more, it's still balanced with results, but some are doing a really good job of really looking at measuring behavior, leadership behaviors. What are the instances? Where are we seeing it? Is it repeated? And they're digging into that, which is super cool. I wish more organizations would follow suit.
What would get in the way of a leader wanting to invest that kind of time and attention?
I've worked for leaders that have left quote unquote bodies in their wake.
Yes.
But they get amazing results. So they are continuously rewarded for those results.